It's been a tumultuous offseason of change for the Seahawks at receiver. No DK Metcalf, no Tyler Lockett. In comes Cooper Kupp. Could a first-round receiver be in the cards for the 2025 NFL Draft? We're going to be taking a deep dive into all 3 days at the receiver position for the upcoming draft here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, whether you're listening from nearby Sammamish, Washington, or Corona, Indiana. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for listening in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We are closing in on 2 weeks away from the 2025 NFL Draft. Today is all about receivers. We'll be looking at first-round possibilities, day 2, standouts, and, of course, day 3, gems. Brought your way courtesy of our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. To say that it's been a seismic, change-filled offseason at receiver for the Seahawks would be a bit of an understatement. DK Metcalf getting traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers after requesting to be traded away. Tyler Lockett released as a cap casualty, both of them out the door. Cooper Kupp comes in after the Rams released him. Homecoming to the state of Washington. Marquez Valdez-Scantling signing as well. Aside from Jackson Smith and Jigba and Jake Bobo, really, this is a completely revamped receiver core, and the Seahawks probably are not done with that overhaul as we head towards the draft. The real question now, Rob, is at pick number 18, or if there's a trade down, or maybe even a trade up, could the Seahawks use their first pick on a wide receiver? There are plenty of fans out there that aren't in favor of that and believe there are other positions that need to be addressed, but this is still a position, both short and long-term, with the moves that were made this offseason, that absolutely could use a first-round caliber talent.
Oh, no question about it. You're looking for receivers that can run. You know, right now, Corbin, the Seahawks have 2 guys that ran a time at 4.49 seconds or faster, and that being Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Tariq Young. So this is one of the slowest wide receiver cores in all of the NFL. And so I do think that wide receiver is a sneaky position of need for the Seahawks. Fortunately, there are a handful of playmakers available in the first round. Whether you want to count Travis Hunter in that group, he is not going to be available to the Seahawks. And while I threw out that idea of possibly Seattle packages the picks to go up and get him, that's not very realistic, just knowing John Schneider's track record in the past. But there are 4 players that I do think have a possibility to be available at number 18 overall that would make an awful lot of sense for them. So I'm just going to kind of jump in. And a player that I have talked about, it seems like almost every different show that we've had over the last couple of months leading up to the draft, and that is Luther Burden III from Missouri. He's 6 foot. He's 206 pounds. So he's got kind of that running back type of a frame. At the same time, he also ran a 4.41 40-yard dash at the combine, including a 1.54 10-second split. This is a guy who is a 5-star recruit. He was actually the Max Preps National High School Player of the Year when he signed with Missouri, and he missed all those expectations that go with that. He was spectacular as a true freshman, scored 6 touchdowns as a receiver, 2 more as a runner, another as a punt returner. He was all SEC each of the last 2 seasons. He has been as productive as any player in this draft class when it comes to being a receiver. And I think that he has the explosive speed, The contact balance, again, kind of reminds you a little bit of a running back. I've used the comparison to Deebo Samuel. I just think that he is exactly the type of a guy that can create after the catch that the Seahawks have been lacking for an awful long time, and that Clint Kubiak is used to having at his disposal. Certainly Sam Darnold is used to having at his disposal. So again, while I don't think that wide receiver is the biggest position of concern for the Seahawks, I do think that Luther Burden III would be a hand-in-glove fit for this franchise.
Yeah, let's stay in the ACC, or let's stay in the SEC for my first selection here in the first round. And with all the conference realignment, I'm surprised that we don't mess up the conferences more often. But I think that you've got to look at Matthew Golden from Texas, who was one of the players that was invited in. And this is worth something as far as I'm concerned. They have shrunk the number of players that are going to be in the green room this year at the draft in Green Bay. Matthew Golden is one of the players that received an invite. Now, obviously, that does not guarantee that he's going to be a first-round pick, but I don't know that he even makes it to the Seahawks at number 18 because there are some teams ahead of Seattle. Dallas Cowboys might want to keep him in state. The Texas standout at number 12. There's a couple other teams that could be interested, but you talked about the lack of speed. Well, you don't have that problem anymore if you draft Matthew Golden. 4.29 40-yard dash, and that speed shows up on film. He is a dynamic downfield threat. He can beat opponents on verticals, on posts, on corner routes, shallow crossers. He can do all kinds of fun stuff with separation and creating big plays. And I feel like there were some plays that were left on the field because Quinn Ewers, the quarterback, and Archie Manning, when he got his reps, there were some plays that they just missed on throws to Matthew Golden. So it feels like his numbers could have been significantly better than what they already were. But this guy, to me, is one of the best receivers in the class. Checks off the box that Seattle is missing now because of DK Metcalf's exit, Tyler Lockett's exit. You get a bona fide deep threat that is more than a one-trick pony, because that's what Marquez Valdes-Scantling is. This kid can run short to intermediate routes, feel like he can be a really good number two, maybe even 1A, 1B type thing like you had with Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jig. But to me, if he falls to number 18, that he's got to be one of the players that you are strongly considering with that selection because of his game-breaking speed.
His game-breaking speed and the fact that he played as well as he did as the season went on at Texas. And again, kind of like we talked about with Burden, and we're going to be talking about several other wide receivers that have return ability. That is one of the things that really intrigues you about Golden. I mean, he had a couple of different, I believe it was kick return touchdowns while he was at Houston before he transferred up to Texas. I'll mention a wide receiver that does not have special teams ability, and that's one of the reasons why I've been a little bit lower on Ted McMillan from Arizona than a lot of people appear to be. That said, at 6'4", 213 pounds, Ted McMillan has that size that the Seahawks now don't have with DK Metcalf out there. And obviously they brought in Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and I think it's actually a reasonable comparison to what you have with Ted McMillan, except I think that there's a much higher upside with McMillan. Whereas with MVS, his game is basically tracking balls over his shoulder. You see Ted McMillan be able to do the crossers, be able to make some people miss. For a guy who's 6'4", and I mentioned 213 pounds, that's what he measured at his pro day. He was 219 pounds at the combine. He did not run at the combine, did run at the pro day, run a 4.53 second 40-yard dash. That's pretty damn fast for a guy of his size. But at the same time, again, I see a guy who, for all of that size, he is not the physical player that you might be expecting. He glides and is smooth rather than being truly sudden or explosive power. But at the same time, the guy is a playmaker. As I mentioned before with Luther Burden III from Missouri, much ballyhooed recruit. Ted McMillan originally signed with Oregon. He only decided to switch over to Arizona to play with his high school quarterback, Noah Fafita. And the rapport between them was obvious, and it's one of the reasons why Ted McMillan has been as productive as he has been over the last 3 seasons. I believe he has, the all-time record at Arizona in terms of receiving yards. He only played 3 years there. So again, if you're looking for a guy who's going to be able to come in and immediately add some size and some speed to the Seahawks receiving core, then you could go. you could make the selection with McMillan here from what used to be the Pac-12, stay relatively local, and still be able to hit a home run.
And the Seahawks have had great success with Jackson Smith-Njigba in his first 2 seasons. Why not get a Corbin copy? Now, Emeka Egbuka, coming from Ohio State, is not exactly a clone of Jackson Smith-Njigba, but the two players do a lot of the same things really well. They are outstanding route runners to the middle of the field, can win contested catches, can create after the catch, and they'll surprise you with downfield ability. I actually think that Egbuka has more upside as a vertical threat than what Jackson Smith-Njigba had coming out of Ohio State. And he did that for the Buckeyes on their run to the national title. He sneaks up on you with his ability to come out of his breaks and then get downfield. He is a master on those posts and corner routes at getting open, and he'll sneak up on you time to time and win vertically. And the other thing I love about Egbuka on film, the dude loves to run block. And in this offense, that is going to be crucial for Clint Kubiak with getting back to the ground game, running a lot of 2 receiver personnel. Egbuka likes to mix it up. So there's some redundancy there with Jack Smith-Njigba. At the same time, he brings some different skills to the table, and he checks off so many boxes that Clint Kubiak looks for at the receiver position. Another guy that can absolutely create big yardage after the catch. I think Egbuka is a guy to keep an eye on, especially if the Seahawks trade down from 18 into the 20s. I expect the 20s is where the sweet spot is going to be for Egbuka to get drafted this year. Probably the 3rd or 4th receiver that is off the board. When we come back, let's say the Seahawks don't use their first pick on a receiver. There's definitely a chance they could go a different direction. There's plenty of talent remaining on day 2 with 4 picks in the 2nd and 3rd round. We will get to the key prospects to watch in the 2nd and 3rd round coming up next year on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. You've probably heard of Chewy. They really do have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. Whether you're shopping for food, treats, or even pet health care, Chewy makes it fast, easy, and affordable with over 100,000 products from all your favorite brands. Chewy has everything your pet needs, from food and treats to toys, beds, and grooming. And it's not just for dogs and cats. They've got supplies for birds, fish, reptiles, and small pets too. Chewy also makes it easy to manage your pet's health with prescriptions, telehealth visits, and even in-person vet clinics rolling out nationwide. AutoShip is a game changer. You can set up automatic deliveries for food, treats, or any essentials so you never run out. You can easily change or cancel anytime. I love how fast Chewy is. I have 4 cats, and I'm constantly ordering food. Having the AutoShip really is a game changer, and they have great interaction. The customer service team is as good as you're going to find for any company in the industry. Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. Right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking the link in the description. Save $20 on your first order with free shipping by clicking the link in the description. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See the site for complete details. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, on our Tuesday show by my co-host, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It's all about wide receivers today in our latest 2025 NFL Draft preview. As we just detailed, there's plenty of first-round possibilities. Might not be the best receiver class there's been in the last few years, but there's still first-round talent. There's a lot of day 2 talent, though. That is really the sweet spot in this draft at the receiver position. And, Rob, I know there's going to be some prospects that we end up just glimmering over, or maybe we just don't talk about at all, but this is the time, day 2. The Seahawks have 4 picks. They've got 50 and 52. They've also got 2 third-rounders. This seems to be the ideal time to go attack the receiver position and pick 1, if not 2 receivers during day 2, where there's a lot of talent that would be worthy of 50 and 52, and certainly in the 3rd round, a number of guys who would be good fits for this offense and give Sam Darnold another weapon on the outside.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before with the first round conversation with Luther Burden III, another wide receiver that I've highlighted many times before is Jack Besh from TCU. One of my absolute favorite players in this draft class, not just for the Seahawks, but for teams in every NFL club. I think you should be looking for a guy that has his combination of size and body control. But at the same time, again, because I've talked about him as much, that I want to kind of shift the focus on a couple of receivers that I haven't talked about much that I do think would be nice fits just from a style perspective to the Seahawks specifically. And I'm going to start off with, you mentioned Matthew Golden from Texas. I'm going to talk about 007, Isaiah Bond, his teammate there. And just like Golden, who transferred up from the University of Houston to Texas, Isaiah Bond initially played his college career at Alabama, where he actually started a game as a true freshman. And just think about all the talent that Alabama has. And then actually led the team in receptions as a sophomore, transfers over to Texas and was their leading pass catcher for much of the year. And then he suffered an ankle injury in the SEC championship game against Georgia. And that's basically why he only caught 2 passes in Texas's final 3 games, where Matthew Golden suddenly kind of seized the opportunity and became an absolute playmaker for the Longhorns. And just like Golden, who ran that 4.29 40 at the combine, Isaiah Bold has spectacular speed, 4.39 seconds in the 40-yard dash, including a 1.51 10-yard split, so absolutely electric. You see the change of direction. You see the explosive straight line speed. At the same time, he's always been one of those guys that leaves you wanting a little bit more. He only had 10 touchdowns over 3 seasons at the college level. Now, granted, that was against elite competition at Texas and Alabama, but at the same time, you still wish that there was a little bit more. That's one of the reasons why I think that he's going to be available on day 2, but I think that the traits suggest that his suggest that his best football is ahead of him, and for a Seahawks squad that has good pass catchers, just are lacking speed and shiftiness, that's where I think the Bond could be a really good fit for the Seahawks. And he also has, again, some return ability as well.
As you mentioned with Jack Besh, I've talked Trey Harris up a ton on this podcast the last couple of months, and the big play ability downfield, can break tackles, is built not quite like DK Metcalf, another Ole Miss receiver, but he's a well-built specimen and certainly has some potential to get a lot better. There's more meat still left on the bone. And I think you could say that with a number of these receivers. Isaiah Bond definitely is a guy that would check off those boxes. But I've talked up Trey Harris a lot. I want to look at a pair of Cyclones who are dizzying talents on the outside, and they offer different talents, different skill sets. Jalen Noel is a player who, if you watched Iowa State this year, he shouldn't have been a guy that was under the radar. But going into the draft season, at least for draft pundits, that's what the case was. If you looked at most draft boards, Jalen Noel was a 4th or 5th round pick. If you watch Iowa State, though, you don't see that. You see a guy that is an absolute playmaker, really good at creating after the catch, goes out and runs in the 4.3s at the combine. He's twitchy, he's explosive, he's dynamic, soft hands, can create both downfield and with the football in his hands. And what really excites me about him from a Seahawks perspective, he's one of the best kick and punt returners in the nation coming into this draft. So he gives you a lot of different dimensions. He's ran the football some. So Jalen Noel is a player that has gone from being a day 3 curiosity into a player that I'd be stunned if he gets out of the 2nd round. And I would say the same for his teammate, Jaden Higgins. Now, Higgins has been much higher on the pecking order this entire process. And I still think there's a slim chance that Jaden Higgins goes on day 1, because you're talking about a guy that's got 6'4" size, but he's much faster than Tet McMillan. He ran in the low 4.4s. And it feels like, as a guy that only played 2 years in the FBS division, he started his college career at the FCS level. This feels like a player that's also got a lot of meat still left in the bone, but he was an 1,100-yard receiver, scored a bunch of touchdowns, a lot of big plays downfield. Still feels like the short to intermediate game that he's got a lot of room to grow, and he's going to be a player that's mostly an offensive guy, not going to give you special teams ability like Noel, but he's got that big body, the ability to win contested catches, go up and win on jump balls, and he's faster than Tet McMillan. Higgins is a player that I'm very high on. I think both these guys are going to be gone in the early part of day 2. Seattle might have to get this player, one of these players, at pick 50 or 52, because I don't see them being available when they are on the board twice in the 3rd round.
That's a good point. And Iowa State, not necessarily a team that was known for producing all these, elite wide receiver prospects, but at the same time, this year they were spectacular. And I'm very curious to kind of see what happens actually at Iowa State this upcoming season, because they got a quarterback in Rocco Beck that already is earning 1st-round buzz. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens now that he doesn't have these 2 dynamic receivers, as different as they are, at his disposal. I'm going to mention a wide receiver that frankly, we've been a little bit remiss in not talking about him more because of his schematic fit, because the fact that he is a local product, and that's Kyle Williams from Washington State. He will be the first player selected from any of the state schools this year in the NFL draft. I view him as a 3rd-round selection, and he's a guy that, again, checks off some boxes for Clint Kubiak as far as a guy that's got incredible feet. He really can, accelerate very smoothly and change directions on a dime. And that is one of the things that I saw over and over again with the wide receivers that the New Orleans Saints have. I was fortunate enough to go to the New Orleans Saints training camp this past year, and it wasn't just the guys like a Rashid Shaheed or a Chris Olave. It was all of their wide receivers. They had better feet, frankly, than they had hands at times. And that would be one of my concerns with Kyle Williams, is there are some drops, but at the same time, he gets open, and a lot of the drops that you see on tape are correctable kind of things where he's trying to make somebody miss before looking the ball in. I think that is something that can be corrected over time. But this is a player who's talked about a lot of guys that had transferred here and there. He was originally at UNLV. He was the Mountain West Conference Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Freshman of the Year, his first season. And then he just goes to Washington State this past season, has 14 touchdown receptions. I mean, that was top 5 in all of college football. He, again, is another player that I think has some split end and flanker and slot receiver possibilities to him. Also has return skills. So again, on day 2, I do think, and not necessarily in the 2nd round, I think more in the 3rd round, Kyle Williams could be a big time addition for the Seahawks.
One of UNLV's top foes in the Mountain West has a dynamic playmaker. Jalen Royals, Utah State, missed some time this year due to an injury, but he was on pace for almost 1,500 yards this season before he got hurt. And last year posted spectacular numbers, double-digit touchdowns. And what was crazy, Rob, about his 2023 season, Jalen Royals had 7 receptions of 50 or more yards by himself. And it's not like Utah State has elite quarterback play. This guy can track the football downfield. He also had a couple of those 50-plus yarders that were shorter passes, and he just took off and darted for big yards after the catch. He can break tackles. He's built more like a running back. And so you can do a lot of different things with it. You can dump the ball off to him, and he can shrug off a couple tackles and then pick up 30 yards for you. He can win downfield, dynamic deep threat. The durability questions, look, he had an injury this year, but prior to that point, he'd been pretty durable. So I don't think that it's a huge deal to potentially put down as a red flag. But this guy is one of the most dynamic downfield threats in this draft class, and he's a player. Another one, I'll be somewhat surprised if he's there when the Seahawks pick in the 3rd round. 50 to 52, that might be the range where you got to get him if you want him. I think there's going to be a major run on receivers between 52 and the start of the 3rd round. Jalen Royals could very easily be one of those players, absolutely electric, and a player that would fit, filling the void for a lot of the stuff the Seahawks now have lost with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett no longer being in town.
Yeah, and one other player that I want to quickly mention is Alec Ayumaner from Stanford. Now, he's 6'2", 206 pounds, so a little bit shorter than some of the Tet McMillans and Marquez Valdez-Scantley's kind of guys that we've been talking about previously, but also definitely taller than a lot of the very quick receivers that we've been highlighting. Ayumaner is a player that has a great deal of upside to him. He's only a redshirt sophomore, and he is a player that played away at Stanford, so obviously not a lot of talent around him. And there are some drops. If I was going to be critical of Kyle Williams from Washington State a moment ago, Manor has more drops than any of the receivers that we're likely going to be talking about today. But at the same time, he has body control. He's got very long arms. And as I mentioned before, with Kyle Williams from Washington State, is I see a guy that most of the drops were because he was trying to make people miss before he actually collected the ball. And that's going to happen when you are basically the only big-time player on your team. And so, to me, when I watch Manor, I see shades of a young Devontae Adams back when he was at Fresno State. That people were questioning his speed, but they didn't recognize the body control, his savviness, his ability to kind of play above the rim. He has a 38.5-inch vertical jump. He's got very long arms. He's got good height. And then he is one of the guys I think that tracks the ball better than most people do when he has got defenders on him. And in the NFL, of course, you always have a defender basically grabbing onto you. So I think that he is going to be a third down specialist, a red zone specialist, the kind of guy that the Seahawks, frankly, already have as far as like slot, and JSN and Cooper Kupp can do that, but they can't necessarily go over the top with the consistency that I believe the Manor can.
When we come back, we've got day 3 prospects to dive into, including a few gems, under-the-radar players that could bolster Seattle's passing attack. We'll get to that up next here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. My Golden State Warriors have been red hot heading towards the postseason. Whether I'm looking at Steph Curry three-pointers or steals or assists, FanDuel has so many different ways to bet on your favorite player props for your favorite team. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com today and claim your $250 in bonus bets. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It's all about wideouts today on our show as we continue our position-by-position 2025 NFL Draft preview. We're closing in on 2 weeks away from the draft. And obviously, Rob, receiver is a position that I don't think it's an under-the-radar need. I mean, fans know that DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are not coming back, and Cooper Kupp's coming off some injury-riddled seasons. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is a number 3 at best. This is a team that absolutely could add some juice and needs to add some juice to their receiving core, particularly in the speed department. And the good news is there are plenty of speedy options on day 3 that should be available at the start of the 4th round. The Seahawks have 5 picks in the final 4 rounds, and they maybe will add to that. Who knows? But they have plenty of opportunities to pick from what should still be a quality day 3 crop at the receiver position, with plenty of guys that offer the amount of speed the Seahawks need to try to mitigate the losses of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about 4 different players here, Corbin, and the slowest of them is Elijah Badger from Florida, who ran a 4.43. So, again, we're going to be talking about straight line speed with each of these players. So I mentioned Elijah Badger. He began his college career at Arizona State and then gambled, went to the SEC to play for the Florida Gators this past season. What I see with him is just some savviness. I mean, he shifts gears very well, catches the ball cleanly. And the 1 year that he was asked to be the primary kick returner, he just finished 6th in all of college football, averaging 29 yards per kickoff return for Arizona State. Why Florida didn't use him more in that capacity, I don't know. But I see a guy that, again, has straight line speed, has some lateral agility to him. He's 6'1", 200 pounds. He's got kind of that classic flanker size and speed to him that I think would be a good fit for the Seahawks. I'm going to mention my favorite wide receiver that I think is going to be available on day 3, but if he is, I think he's an absolute steal. He should go in the 3rd round, and that's Torrey Horton from Colorado State. This is another player that originally was at a different program. He was at Nevada, where he was spectacular. Had 5 touchdown receptions as a true freshman, 5 touchdown receptions as a sophomore, transfers to Colorado State and is absolutely unbelievable there. And then he gets injured, and that's what basically kind of screwed everything up for him. But he's 6'3", he's 196 pounds. 3 of the 4 years at Colorado State that he had at least 1 punt return for a touchdown. A 6'3" punt returner touchdowns. I mean, he's a 2-time team captain. Corbin, he ran a 4.41 at coming off of a knee injury. To me, this is a guy that a lot of people are sleeping on nationally. That again, I think is a beautiful fit in what Clint Kubiak has prioritized at the receiver position.
I think in Clint Kubiak's offense, more so than we saw with Ryan Grubb or Shane Waldron or certainly Brian Schottenheimer. I love Schottenheimer's offense, but you were not going to see as many gadget plays in those offenses. You're going to see that with Clint Kubiak. When I turned on my first Saint game last year that I was watching, literally 2 plays in, Rashid Shaheed is getting a jet sweep pitch. And then a couple plays later, they were running an end around. So they are going to do a lot of different stuff like that. And that means you need to have a receiver or two that have some running ability. And Jackson Smith-Njigba's done this a couple times. He's done jet sweeps, but you need a real dynamic guy with running back background. Savion Williams is as multidimensional as any running back receiver combo in this draft. He averaged over 5 yards per carry last year for TCU, and he eclipsed 300 rushing yards. Now, he never had more than 700 receiving yards in a season there, so he hasn't been the most prolific receiver in terms of production, but he is a viable downfield threat at 6'4". He's got 4.4 speed, so he can move, he can fly. This guy reminds me a lot of Cordarrelle Patterson, because many of our listeners may remember Cordarrelle Patterson ended up becoming a dynamic running back midway through his career with the Atlanta Falcons, the Chicago Bears, and obviously an awesome kick returner as well. Savion Williams is one of the best kick returners in this draft class. So not only can he run the football out of the backfield and do things as a jet sweep specialist, run end arounds with him, he can handle screens, create after the catch, he can win downfield. He's been inconsistent with drops, but he hasn't had as many opportunities in the passing game. I still think there's a lot of upside that's untapped there as a receiver. But you add in the running ability and the special teams talent, and Savion Williams is a guy that could very easily go on day 2. I think he's one of the more sporadic players when we're looking at where he could land. He could be a 2nd rounder. It could be the 4th round. We'll see how teams value his receiving skill, but he gives a lot of different dimensions to an offense that I think Clint Kubiak is going to be looking for. And oh, by the way, the Seahawks had him in for one of their official 30 visits, so they are certainly interested in his capabilities.
Yeah, no question about it. I'll mention another player that's got some Seahawk ties that might be interesting to some of our listeners, and that being the Keandre Lambert-Smith. And this is a player that it's kind of interesting. He began his career at Penn State, wound up transferring to Auburn. In neither place did they have much of a accurate quarterback throwing the football, with all due respect to Drew Aller at Penn State, who some project to be an early 2026 NFL draft selection at the quarterback position. But this is a guy who doesn't have the special teams, production that we've talked about with most of these other wide receivers. He is not as versatile as, say, Savion Williams that you just mentioned. But at the same time, the Seahawk ties to me are interesting. He actually kind of reminds me of Paul Richardson, former Seahawk wide receiver, of course, in that he can flat out fly, 6'1", 190 pounds. And he actually is one of the better receivers in this class. Like I mentioned with Alec Ayumanor, as far as when the ball is up in the air, he really high points it very well. He's got long arms. He's able to kind of contort his body and make some of the more difficult receptions. And unfortunately, there are some drops on tape as well. Not only the Paul Richardson comparison here is one of the reasons why I mentioned the Seahawks. He also is the nephew of Seahawks legend Cam Chancellor. And so I think that he is somebody that, for a lot of different reasons, would make some sense for the Seahawks. And finally, when you're talking before about the gadget plays, the player that immediately jumped out to me is Jalen Lane from Virginia Tech. Now, he began his college career at Middle Tennessee State. He was not only a wide receiver, he also had some snaps where he was coming on reverses and things like that. Dynamic punt and kick returner. 5'9¾", 191 pounds. So he's pretty built for a shorter wide receiver, and 32-inch arms, and yet still posted 14 repetitions at 225 pounds. That's an extraordinary combination of 4.34 speed and strength. So again, he is one of those dynamic kind of slot receivers that I think would make a lot of sense in this scheme.
And I've certainly got a type when we're looking at day 3, away from Savion Williams, who at 6'4" is one of the taller receivers in this draft. But I'm all about versatility right now. Nick Nash at San Jose State was a quarterback at the beginning of his college career, transitioned to receiver, and all he did is go out and score 16 touchdowns this last season. He can win downfield. Now, he is not a burner. He ran in the 4.5s, but he is able to create after the catch, and I think some of that's the former dual threat quarterback background. He ran the football a lot when he was a quarterback, and you can see that after the catch. He didn't have very many drops, so he's a reliable target. He can win downfield. He can run routes extremely well for a converted quarterback, and he's obviously a very high IQ player. He's probably a 4th or 5th round pick. The same can be said for Pat Bryant, who has a very similar build, another 6'3", 190-pound receiver that exploded this last season for Illinois. And Illinois doesn't throw the football very much. That's not their game. But Pat Bryant was one of the most explosive downfield targets in all of college football, ranked in the top 3 in 20-plus yard touchdown receptions this past season. He gives you 4.4 speed, a little faster than Nick Nash, but he can win downfield. He can win over the middle of the field. And he's a guy that, even though he didn't return kicks at Illinois, I think that the talent is there. He's at least a guy you could give a look and see if he's capable of doing it, because he's got long strides, he's explosive, has some change of direction ability. So I'm a big fan of him. And LeJante Wester, let's talk Colorado real quick. Colorado is probably going to have 3 receivers that go on day 3. They've got Jimmy Horn, who had some decent numbers at Colorado, but was very inconsistent. Will Shepard is a bigger receiver that's probably going to go on day 3. Of those 3 players, though, LeJante Wester, formerly of Florida Atlantic, is actually the player that I am most intrigued by, because he gives you the versatility element. He's explosive. Didn't test as well as I thought he was going to, but this is a guy, when you turn on the tape, he runs away from people. Dynamic kick and punt return weapon. Had a bunch of big plays at Florida Atlantic. Colorado, even though he was third fiddle some games, still averaged more than 16 yards per catch for the Buffaloes. This is a guy, I think, with his size, he's a much smaller receiver. He is a player that's going to slip down to the back part of day 3, most likely. You could get really good value for a guy that can play in special teams right away and can give you some big play threat capabilities, and might develop into something that typically you're going to draft in the middle rounds rather than the late rounds. So he is a guy that I think offers a lot of upside that should be available late in the draft with his size issues and the fact that his productivity was hit and miss when he went to play in the Big 12. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back for our Wednesday show, it's back to the defensive side of the football. We're going to be talking cornerbacks, the ones that have to stop the receivers we're talking about, and kind of a sneaky good cornerback class that has a lot of Seahawky type players at that position. Make sure that you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Go Hawks.